Okay, we are officially live and we'll just wait a few minutes as people show up. I am going to pull up YouTube again because I think that's the one you can actually see people on. Let's see. It's very weird watching myself with the time delay.
Yeah, mine just says started streaming.
Okay.
Oh,
YouTube
6 watching. 7 watching.
That's what I had. So, okay. So do you think we should jump right in with introductions and people can just kind of show up as they go, since we do have some people waiting, or what do you think, Hannah?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So, hi everybody. My name is Kara. We're going to do a little bit more official introductions in a little bit. But before we do that, I just kind of wanted to give like an overview of how this discussion or this live show is going to work. So this is about underhyped books and just book hype in general. And it is hosted on my channel because of the two of us, I'm the one with a YouTube channel. Hannah has recently started her book blog, which I have linked in the description, in addition to her Instagram. And this is going to be more of a like discussion between us and with you guys too, rather than like one person hosting and the other person responding kind of thing. That said, we do both have notes that we brought with us, like specific things that we want to talk about. So if we get partway through and we decide that we want to make it a little more structured, we're probably going to do that. This is kind of like a loosely, as you can tell, kind of a loosely structured discussion because we both have a lot of thoughts on this topic. And yeah, so I think we're going to jump in. We're going to introduce ourselves and just talk a little bit about where this idea came from. And before we do that, like I said, I have Hannah linked down below. You should definitely follow her. She's wonderful. I have talked about how much I love her before. And I also have a few links about ways you can continue to support movements like the Black Lives Matter movement going on right now and kind of world events in general. So please be sure to check those out as well. And now I will have Hannah introduce herself to everybody.
Okay. Hey everyone. I'm Hannah. I of the Bookstagram account mainly, then Hermione, and I've been there for nearly 3 years now. And like, that's the main thing. I recently started a blog as well, partly because I feel like there's not that much space for underhyped books on Bookstagram, which is something I know we're going to discuss. And I don't know. I feel like that's the important bit. I don't know.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, my name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden, which you obviously know since you are here right now. And yeah, Hannah and I were discussing, I don't remember how it came up, but we were talking about, I think it was like the
charity challenge.
Yes, it was. So we were thinking a lot about like the hyped books that we had read and which ones we had liked and didn't like. And we both kind of had similar experiences where like there were some hits, but we were noticing that a lot of the books that get a lot of attention are ones that don't necessarily appeal to everyone. Like you would think if something is very talked about and very popular, it would be because it appeals to a wide range of readers. And we were kind of finding that wasn't true. And we both have had kind of thoughts and feelings about book hype and which books get hyped and how that works in book blogging. And we just ended up talking about it a lot. And we were kind of like, let's make this a thing. Like let's talk about it. With like some purpose and do recommendations and things. So the first part is going to be this discussion, and we are going to have actual like underhyped book recommendations coming later. Yeah, so this is kind of like a passion project of ours that we're like, let's just get other people involved and make it happen. And yeah, so Hannah, something you mentioned just now was like why you ended up creating a book blog rather than just sticking to Instagram. You mentioned that just like let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm thinking as well about Ramila from I think tweeted recently that Bookstagram it's the same 3 authors 50% of the time, and I think that for a variety of reasons people kind of often post about all the same books that are already super popular, and that kind of posts about lesser known books, or often um, or books that less people know about get less engagement, and therefore there are less of them because people want the engagement for obvious reasons. Um, and so books like that just kind of don't get talked about much. And it almost seems like there's just not kind of space there on the platform as it currently is.
Yeah. And I'm not on Instagram, so you might have to explain a couple things to me. Do you feel like on Bookstagram it's more, which is this is not a negative thing, it's more like fandom focused, like enthusiasm about like kind of what you're saying, like books that people already know and love rather than necessarily finding books? Like, is that, would you say that's true?
I do think so. I think that's something I have talked about a bit in the past as well, that Bookstagram is more of a there's a lot of gushing and there's a lot of posts about people's favorite books and things that they love, which like is valuable, obviously, and there's a place for that. And it's good that there is a place for that. But I mean, it depends on the person as well and who you follow. But generally, there's less of this is what I'm currently reading, this is what I think of it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like on BookTube, like there's a lot of talk about people um wanting like underhyped recommendations videos and things, and to an extent I think that is true. I do notice like I get good engagement when I do like underhyped books and everything, and also just like I enjoy talking about underhyped books. I enjoy like sharing those recommendations with other people because I feel like there's more of a like personal investment in getting people excited about, you know, books that you don't feel get enough attention. But I think when it comes to other kinds of content on BookTube, like if I do a review for a book that most people haven't heard of, it's probably not going to get that many views. Whereas if it was like a popular genre or kind of book on BookTube, like if I did like underrated fantasy novels or something, that would probably get more, like substantially more hits. And I think part of that is because review videos in general, they get really good views over time, but right away they don't usually take off, at least in like my experience and most people I've talked to. Um, so I do feel like on BookTube there is like movement towards people wanting to seek out, you know, not the same books that everyone talks about, but it's one of those things too where it's like people say they want something, but if you look at the videos that do well, it's not always, you know, it's not always the
Mm-hmm.
same. Kind of like what you're saying for Instagram is like when you're wanting engagement, you end up kind of creating some of the same content. And it looks like we have Wave agreeing definitely on Instagram. And she also said, or excuse me, they also said review videos have a lot of spoilers, so people don't want to be spoiled. That's a good point. I think there is like spoiler free reviews versus like spoiler discussions. I think those can also um,
Mm.
perform differently. Yeah. Do you feel like you normally do more spoiler free? Like if you are reviewing a book in particular, do you feel like you do more spoiler free or more discussions, Hannah?
I don't know. I mean, Instagram is so limited in what you can say anyway that I think things are spoiler free just because it's almost hard to give spoilers in the in the space that you've got.
Yeah.
Um, and although, but when it comes back to like people talking about fandom and the things that they love, then that is spoilery then.
Right.
Um, well, and I also think that there's kind of a thing about people feeling they have to catch up, or people feeling that they have to read all the popular books so that they can be part of the discussion and can be involved,
Yeah.
which also contributes to people reading less as well as posting about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I There's definitely a couple of series I can think of where like it's like would I have continued reading this series if I wasn't like invested in like knowing what everyone
Mm.
was talking about? Like I don't think so. Um and I feel like also like as like the longer that you're in the book blogging and book reviewing community, I think that does start to fade a little bit or you get more comfortable just like recognizing that yeah, this book is really popular. Everyone listed it as one of their favorites, but I know I that this is not my thing. I probably wouldn't enjoy it. And I think the urge to be a part of the hype discussion, even if it's for a book you don't like, I think that does start to fade after a little bit. But like there's a couple series lately that have been getting a lot more, like they're hyped already, but there's like another book coming out, so people are talking about them again. And I'm starting to be tempted. It's like maybe I should try that series again, even though it's like I probably still wouldn't like it. Okay. I'm gonna look for comments. Julie also agrees about Bookstagram, that like you tend to see the same books popping up all the time, and also that it is a lot more fandom based. Um, yeah, which like as you were saying, there's a place for that, and it's that kind of enthusiasm is wonderful, but it does like depending on what you're looking for, like if you're looking for a review of a book or if you're looking for recommendations, like enthusiasm is like something you're really excited for other people having, but it doesn't necessarily help you pick out a book, you know?
Yeah, well, I think that's. I mean, it's kind of nice that Bookstagram is that, and that
Yeah.
that there are the different platforms, because I know like the crossover. We've talked about how the crossover between Bookstagram and BookTube is surprisingly small, but I know a lot of Bookstagrammers do watch at least some BookTube, so I guess you are getting the recommendations from somewhere, or it's okay that there's that split.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of, in a way it's kind of nice that there is like different platforms for different I don't know, I guess bookish needs that people have.
Mm,
Like I think that is cool. I also wonder if part of the reason there's not a lot of crossover between BookTube and Instagram is for YouTube at least. Like you don't have to have an account to watch it. Like you don't have to have a channel. You don't even have to sign up in order to subscribe to somebody necessarily. You can just watch a video. Whereas with Instagram, like you really can't interact with people or view posts unless you create your own account, like
mhm.
I don't know. I was just thinking about that. It's like obviously I don't have an Instagram, so sometimes like I have other friends or like people I know who I want to support on Instagram, and it's like I can share their posts and everything, but it's hard to engage when you don't actually have an account. So I wonder if that's one of the reasons why there's not a lot of that crossover.
Mm.
Um, Also, Kelly said that she has also felt that pressure to read the popular books to join the conversation, but then often doesn't end up enjoying them. Which is kind of something we were talking about. Is it's like we get sucked in and then we don't have a good time, and it's like, well, I should have known I wouldn't like this, but I got tempted.
Yeah, and I mean that's how this all started. Like we were saying that we did that challenge, and actually
Yeah.
we'd not enjoyed a lot of the books that were on there.
Yeah. And some of the ones, like, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like some of the ones that I have read and like I hadn't enjoyed were ones where I'm like, if I had thought about this, I would have known that this probably was not the book for me, like, but knowing my reading taste sort of went out the window because I'm like, I just want to be a part of what everyone's talking about. Um, let's
Yeah,
see.
and Annalisa May is making a good point as well that book covers also play a part. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like much more aesthetic focused, I think.
Mm.
Um, and even on, I mean, even on BookTube, that happens too with like people talking about like, yeah, I didn't like this book, but I'm going to keep it because the cover is beautiful. um, yeah. And then, so we talked a little bit about like the different book blogging platforms and how those affect hype. Um, do we want to talk a little bit about like the publishing industry and how they contribute to it? Because I think like obviously book reviewing platforms, like those are for us, like those are for consumers of books, not necessarily for publishers or authors, even though they do end up working with bloggers sometimes. Um, so do you want to like talk a little bit about how we feel like the publishing industry also kind of contributes to this problem of hype? Because I know we both have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, the publishers definitely, it what the books that they choose to put money behind are the ones which are going to do well, which are the ones which people are going to find to build up hype about in the first place.
Yeah. And this, I think this is something that we'll end up talking about later too, but it makes this cycle, this kind of self-sustaining
Hmm.
cycle, because like the books that publishers spend money promoting are the ones that people are more likely to see. So they're the ones people are more likely to read and review, which makes other people see them and pick them up too. Um, and it's weird too because like from a business perspective, I guess I can. I guess I can kind of understand it. Like, it's probably more efficient to choose a few books from what you're publishing that season or whatever, to put a lot of money behind rather than trying to do every book with like just a little bit of money. But I wish they would do more like reaching out to readers or reviewers for those lesser known books, because like they don't need to have like a multi-million dollar like campaign, like putting it in Goodreads ads and everything and recommending it in people's search bars. Like, especially for a book community that is so like word of mouth focused, like, because
Mm.
pretty much everything we read is like technically word of mouth, even if it's digital. Um, so like I just wish that they would see that there are other ways to like promote books rather than like just throwing like all the money behind it and like plastering it across the internet. It's like you could do like small scale, like especially for smaller like imprints or publishing houses where like just a few extra sales might make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And like it doesn't cost much or anything to send, any arc to three bloggers, it wouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And especially if you like, I feel like this is the conversation that happens periodically, but like talking about how essentially reviewers are all like doing free labor, like we're
Mm.
hand selling books usually for free. Sometimes people are sponsored. Um, and it's like you said, it's like if they send out like a handful of e-arcs to bloggers, if even one of those people passes on the recommendation to like two more people, and then maybe
Mm.
one of those people passes it on to five more people, it's like at the end of the day, you could end up selling a lot of copies of that book for like pretty minimal investment from them. Okay, I'm trying to keep up with comments here. Kelly, she said she wishes there was a way to easily find small press or independently published books. Yeah, I think like most of the ones I have found are kind of by accident. Um, like I sometimes see them recommended for being similar to other books, and yeah, there are some really great like talented authors out there who are either like small published or independently published, and like they just don't have the marketing budget behind them, and it's like the quality might be every bit as good of as like the ones that they're really pushing, but
Yeah, or
yeah.
self-published even, like which like the quality can be variable for self-published books, so I understand, but some of them are, really wonderful and
Yeah.
get absolutely no attention.
Yeah, I know, and it's like every once in a while like a self-published author will get picked up by a like traditional publisher, which is great, but I almost feel like it's like when you find a like an indie published author or a self-published author that you love, it's like you kind of have to like adopt them and like make a
Mhm.
concerted effort to get people to like know about this book and like read it and everything. Um, yeah, it's like that you have to do like so much. I don't want to call it work exactly because like obviously we enjoy doing it, but you have to put so much energy into like counterbalancing those books that have
Yeah,
so much hype and money behind them.
yeah, exactly. Well, the other thing that I was thinking that we might mention is kind of miscategorization. Like I know a lot of people talk about like women's fantasy being categorized as YA, and I think was thinking with Frances Harding, who is someone that Cara and I both really love,
Yes.
who keeps being listed under middle grade, and well, more people wish more people read middle grade, which is a separate issue, but I really think that being put in middle grade does her a disservice. Um,
Yeah.
and she's not getting the attention that she might otherwise.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's like another thing about this publishing model that everybody seems to have, is that it makes it really hard for books that don't fit in categories to do well. Because I think in a lot of ways, Frances Harding is kind of a like a crossover author almost. Like, because I agree, I think in general her books are a lot darker and heavier than people tend to associate with middle grade. But she ends up getting put in that section, and then people are kind of surprised when they actually like read something for her. And I've noticed something about myself is that I tend to really get along with books that kind of straddle middle grade and YA. Like I read, both of us read like all over the age range map anyway, but I've just noticed that ones that can kind of like sit in both categories are ones that for whatever reason tend to do really well for me. And it wasn't until I noticed that I started noticing it's like, wow, the way that we categorize books and the way that like book hype kind of works is that if it's hard to categorize a book, it's hard to recommend it, or
Hmm.
it's like hard to even sell it to people because it's like, I don't know, you're going from like, just trust me, read this, rather than being able to say like, here's the exact kind of book it is if you're looking for this.
Hmm. Yeah, and it also means that as much, there's not as many other books that you can compare it to, which hyped
Yeah.
books perhaps that might be a something that people can make sense of.
Yeah, I know. Well, and comp titles, I think, I don't know if we had that specifically that we wanted to talk about, but that's, I think, very closely tied to
Mm,
book hype and what books get hyped and which ones don't. But like Sylvia Moreno Garcia, who is an author I have really enjoyed, her book Mexican Gothic just came out and
mm,
it's been doing like pretty well. Like I think this is the first time, like she's been writing great books for years, and I think this is the first time she's hit the New York Times bestseller list, which is like a whole nother, the way they curate that is a whole nother issue. um, but she has been very vocal about telling readers and reviewers and publishers, like people writing blurbs about her, like, this is not magical realism. Do not call everything that Latinx authors write magical realism. Like, because she's really passionate about people, like people from marginalized backgrounds getting to write any genre. And so
mm,
she's saying, like, if you categorize this book as horror, which it is, then the next time some like a diverse author wants to write a horror novel, they're going to have something to compare it to that is actually like similar to it. So yeah, like that's something I've seen her tweeting a lot about recently, and I feel like that's part of this too, is like comp titles and the way that comp titles kind of like put books in boxes, but if you're going to use them, at least use them right, you know? Okay. Um, let's see. So, do we want to go ahead and talk about um, what books tend to get hyped and especially how that relates to marginalized authors, which we have kind of touched on already, but I know that's like a big component that we both wanted to focus on.
yeah, I mean, I guess like we were talking about the publishing cycle, it tends to be, books that are the same as what's already out there, whether, and it does go in waves, with the YA dystopian, and then it's the fae, and then it's the, you know, whatever, quite samey is sounds like an insult. I don't mean it, pejoratively, but
Yeah, no, I know
you know
what
what
you
I mean.
mean. Yeah. Um, and something else you pointed out that I think was really good, which like you should talk about rather than me summarizing. So I'll just mention like um, what you said about it being like a self-fulfilling cycle. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that is a big component of this too.
Yeah, about like the posts and then the reading, that bit.
Yeah, and kind of like how we were talking about, like you mentioned that the cycle of hype like excludes diverse books further because like it's not just like publishers are more likely to promote and support books by like white, straight, etc. authors, but also that once the hype has started, it's like a continuing cycle. Like if you want to talk about how that like is kind of a subtly different point from that.
Yeah, well, so I think there's two things here. One is that yeah, so if a book, a diverse book particularly, doesn't get a lot of hype, the publisher will not, like we were talking about, won't put money behind another book which is similar or written by a similar author, which excludes
Yeah.
then diverse authors. And also that um, I think people, again, similar to what we were saying earlier, when you see a lot of people posting about the popular books and then that's what you read about, that means you ignore the the less hyped ones, and because the less hyped ones tend to be the diverse ones, that means that they just get further and further ignored.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that I feel like something that reviewers and readers can do, or that they have to realize that they need to do, is they can't just like wait and how do I want to say this? It's like I've seen people talking about how like, well, I just like I don't like actively try to read diversely or non-diversely. It's like I just, pick up what I'm interested in, like what I like hear about. And I think the problem with that is related to what you were saying, where like if you just rely on what you see, you're pretty much only going to see
Hmm.
the books that are already popular or that are already um like the majority, And it's like I think we as readers, like we have to understand that we need to like actively like we have to actively seek out books by diverse authors just to try and like bring it up to like the level of like
Hmm.
um the like attention that like majority writing authors are already getting. So it's kind of what we were talking about earlier where you have to like put in so much effort just to like
Hmm.
bring it up like to be even. It's kind of like that where like we have to overcompensate almost, and even then it's like I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. Like I don't know where I was going with that sentence,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah, no,
yeah.
exactly. And you hope that if, if people do that, then eventually it'll get to the point where those books and those authors are published without it having to be something that you seek out, and then you can just read the things you're interested in, and it will be diverse by default.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like another like if people need another reason for doing it, it's like you will read you will find books that you love by doing this. It's not like you're making yourself read like
Hmm.
subpar books or something, but like, well, at least they're diverse. It's like the point is that amazing authors who are from my marginalized backgrounds are not getting the attention, and it has nothing to do with the quality of like what they're writing. Because I've also seen people being like, well, I don't want to read something just because it's diverse. And it's like, well, the point is that you have to like actively seek those out, and they are good books and they're just like not getting the attention. It's almost
Hmm.
like, well, it goes back to the cycle that we were talking about where it's like you have to go out and find them before you can like see more of them almost.
Hmm. Yeah, and like read the things that you think you will like. Don't read a diverse book that is a genre you hate. Like there will be something out there that is in a genre that you like.
Yeah, I know, exactly. That's something that really frustrates me too, is they're like, "Well, I read diversely like you said, and I didn't like it, so I shouldn't do that." And it's like, "Did you read something that you would be interested in?" It's like, "No." Yeah. No, that's an excellent point yeah, it's like it's frustrating because it really doesn't require people to change their reading habits that much. Like, it's really just about doing like putting a little more effort into researching what you're going to pick up. Like, no one's saying like read things that you don't want to because diversity. They're saying like if you find something that you enjoy reading, like a genre or like a subgenre or something, like I can guarantee there are diverse authors who are not getting the attention they deserve for writing books in that category. So like read those in addition to what you're reading. And then let's see. Yes, exactly. So April says it isn't that diverse books don't exist. We just have to actively seek them out. And then if publishers see that there's more of a demand for those books, maybe they'd get more exposure. Yeah, and that's a really good point, is this idea of like voting with your money or voting with your
Hmm.
reviews, where like one of the ways that's why pre-orders are such a big deal, for example. It's like one of the ways that you can definitively communicate to publishers that we want to see diverse books and we want to see certain kinds of stories is if you read them and you buy them or you get them from your library or you talk about them. Like um there's actually a lot of ways that you can show support for a book and you can communicate that without necessarily like buying a copy, if that's not something that you're able to do for like every book obviously that you want to talk about. um yeah, so that's a good point, is like using our choices to communicate what we support
Hmm.
is one of the ways that they pay attention, I think, especially if it's money related.
Yeah.
Let's see, do you have any other notes about that category, Hannah?
Um, I think maybe one it kind of comes into what you're talking about bestseller lists, which we might get onto in a bit, but also the fact that like some really high profile diverse books do get on there, like The Hate You Give or Children of Blood and Bone or A Song of Wraiths and Ruin recently, and then people
Hmm.
think that the problem is solved because they're there, whereas that's such a tiny fraction of the diverse authors. You know, 3 books isn't enough to solve the problem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It doesn't. it's like unless you sustain that, unless like authors continue to have that kind of exposure, yeah, it's like a temporary fix or like not even a fix. And I think also that's sort of related is when there are those really high profile diverse books, I feel like they can almost become like mascots
Hmm.
where people sort of like they almost feel like, oh, I can stop looking for books by black authors because I read The Hate You Give, or something
Hmm.
like that, where like it's important to read and support the ones that are very well known, and it's great to see that. Like it's really great to see that we have several black authors on the bestseller list right now. But it's not like you can like it's not like you read like Angie Thomas and you're like, all right, I'm done learning about racism, like
Yeah, and
um
it puts so much pressure on the authors as well. Like it's not their
yeah,
job to be a figurehead for
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. Yeah, it's like they don't represent the entire community they're writing for, and it's unfair to
Hmm.
expect that from them. And this also kind of goes back to what we were saying before, is like then if people, for whatever reason, if they read one of those very popular books and it doesn't, like they don't like the writing style or something, like whatever, um then they're like, oh well, like black authors don't work for me or something. And it's like, well, you
Hmm.
can't read like the only popular book by a black author and decide that you're just not going to try anymore.
Yeah, and also, I like when I read On the Come Up, I didn't like it didn't completely work for me, and one of the reasons was that I felt like she was trying to cram in too many issues, and like this is completely conjecture, but I wonder if it was because she knew that loads of people are going to read this book and loads of people are not going to read other books, so all these issues need to be talked about, and so I'm going to put them all in here in
Yeah.
case people don't read anything else about it.
Right. Like she was kind of feeling, she might have been feeling like she had to like represent like
Yeah.
every issue that could possibly come up in case this is, yeah, the only book people read. And then Kelly also mentioned something related. She said she's had people comment on her videos about not paying attention to the race of the author because they're just reading books that sound good. But she says, but if you don't pay attention, you end up reading white authors only.
Hmm.
And yeah, exactly. I think that's very well put. That's pretty much like what um, that fits it right in with what we were discussing, where it's like if you just kind of let it happen, you're only going to read the books that are already known and that are already like promoted, that are already popular, which again tend to be white, straight, etc.
Hmm.
Like um yeah, it's like you have to you have to actually make an effort and put in energy and make a conscious decision. I'm going to look for like books by authors that are different from me or that are marginalized in some way. And um yeah, because if you just like if you just wait and see, it's like you're only going to get what's already there. Um, and then Julie also said that when asked about a diverse book, a lot of people can only list the one or two really
Hmm.
well-known popular ones. Yeah, yeah, and I'm seeing a little bit of that right now too. Is like yeah, is like people posting lists of books by Black authors or like other like marginalizations. And again, it's wonderful that some of those books are doing so well, but it doesn't really do like the bigger issue any
Hmm.
favors if you act like, well, racism is solved because everybody has read like Angie Thomas or like Dear Martin or something like
Hmm.
that. Um, let's see if we and then you mentioned the New York Times bestseller list. Do we want to talk about book awards a little bit?
Um, yeah, I mean, so I guess, yeah, it very much depends which award you're looking at. I think, and professional awards particularly are still very traditional and very, um, old white men kind of
Yeah.
awards.
Yep.
And and
Agreed.
then but then also if you look at the Goodreads Choice Awards or whatever, which are more crowdsourced, that is still only the reason that books get on that list is because they are the hyped ones,
Yeah.
whether
It's
they're
got
diverse or
white
not.
women.
And yes, and if people are going to go and read the books that are on that list, they're more 90% of them you will already have heard of because that's how they got onto the list in the first place.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, actually, Goodreads is one of the ones I had written down specifically. um, yeah, to talk about. I'm conflicted because on the one hand, like the idea of a book award sounds great. It sounds like something I should be really into, but I have been very I don't know if like I want to say like dissatisfied, but I have not been thrilled with like most of the major awards recently. Like, because like you mentioned, like the Goodreads ones that are more like popular, like crowdsourced or like average reader, I guess, focused. Those have a very particular kind of author who wins them every time. Like, I'm trying to think how many Goodreads Choice Awards I've like actively looked at for the last couple of years. I think it's just been since I was on BookTube. I didn't really know it was a thing before
mhm,
then. Um, and it's really frustrating for like the nomination period. They'll have like one or two books by non-white authors, and they inevitably do not make it to the next round. Um, and then whereas you have like the more official or like highbrow ones, kind of like you were saying, like the great literary awards, it's like that is kind of the similar problem and just a different demographic. Like you said, it tends to be old white men choosing books by other old white men about old white men. um, and it's actually one of the reasons, like, I don't remember if we talked about this part, but it's like I stopped using literary fiction to describe things
mhm.
because when I tried to find out what the definition was, it was basically like this group of old guys decided that this book has more merit than the other. And I'm like, well, that's not super helpful. Um, so I don't know. Basically, I haven't really found a a like major book award that I feel like does a good job of like actually I mean, you can't like objectively judge books like completely, but I feel like some of them aren't even trying, you know?
Mm.
So,
Yeah, and I also think there's nothing, I don't know, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no award that I know of that seeks out on, books that people haven't necessarily read. And like, I know there's value in obviously like rewarding the books that are widely loved, but also it would, it could also be nice to lift up the books that no one's heard of.
right, like it might be kind of a cool idea. I don't know if there's an award somewhere that does this, but if there were like you have the panel of judges who they actually like make an effort to have more than one type of person judging books, and it's like they all just read a bunch of books that they're interested in that they haven't heard of, and they pick the one they like the best and that they think is the best, and then you would actually get like a wide range of stories rather than having kind of like variations on the same thing over and over. um yeah, like I don't know, and that
Yeah,
I
I
feel
know.
like oh sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like there's the self-published fantasy one, which is I guess kind of like that, but very very niche. So
Yeah,
you want
well, and
something.
it's like I feel like smaller awards are doing a lot better with it. Like there's well there are several funds set up, and there's even like the more well-known ones like the Coretta Scott King Award, or I just learned about recently like Pura Belpré, I think, who
Mhm.
does, I don't know if it's just for picture books, but it's based on Latinx authors.
Hmm.
So there are like slightly well-known, in her case, awards that are doing that kind of work, but like if you're talking about things that are as well known as the Newbery Award for like middle grade or for children's fiction, like there's not really something comparable that does make an effort to be inclusive. And I feel like everything we have talked about has like come back to this idea of like a self-fulfilling like cycle almost, because it's like if those awards don't get a lot of attention, like they're never going to become as like well known as like the Newbery, or I can't think of any other book awards right now, but um yeah, it just like comes back to that idea of like you have to put in so much more effort to find something that's not already talked about a lot.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah. Although with that said, I don't know if the like the big major critics awards are becoming less prevalent because the Nobel Prize for Literature completely fell apart a few years ago, and I think it's the is it the National Book Critics Award in America, like that it's just come out that, or in the past couple of weeks, it's also fallen apart because it's they've some emails were leaked or something, and it's very clearly not making an effort to be inclusive. And I wonder, I don't know if people are paying less and less attention to critics, then maybe there's a space there for this kind of, new and more inclusive award to come in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know more about that recent book award scandal than I do because I had not heard of that. um, yeah, that is like slightly encouraging, and I feel like even though every year the Goodreads choice list comes out, we have like the same conversation of like, wow, a lot of white people, on this list. I do feel like maybe this is optimistic, but I do feel like every time that happens, the like effects of that or like people fighting back against that lasts a little longer, like or that like more people become like permanently dedicated to like finding books that are
Mhm.
like not the same thing. So I'm hoping that we are kind of moving in the right direction. Um Also, we've said old white men awards who think they know what a black woman wants to read. Yeah. Yeah, the like own voices discussion is a whole other separate and discouraging issue. Um, yeah. Anything else on like awards or kind of like book lists? I don't know if I had. Well, there's also the fact that the New York Times is apparently like I don't know if they just admitted it or if somebody just like called them on it, but their like bestseller award is curated. So basically useless as actually determining what people are buying. Um,
Yeah, well, and that there was that book that got onto it a couple of years ago.
yes,
So it's clearly not, difficult or representative,
right. Was it Handbook for Mortals or
something
something?
like that.
Yeah, no, I remember that. um, yeah, and but then at the same time, it's seeing, um, seeing like a Song of Wraiths and Ruin be like an instant New York Times bestseller. That is still exciting, even
Mm.
though I'm like, I don't trust your award anymore. But like, this is still good. Um, yeah, yeah, and I think also the thing with book awards is like I just need to kind of do what we've been talking about with authors in general, which is like I need to specifically find book awards that do that and maybe like talk like when people do those like videos or posts where it's like I read all of the like National Book Award nominees or like Women's Prize for Fiction nominees, like maybe do those with smaller awards that are making an effort, and then that's one way that we could like continue to encourage that. I think also in general I'm just like not good at paying attention to book awards anymore. Or not that I ever really was, but especially after I got frustrated with some of the really popular ones, I was like, I don't need you telling me what to read anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And so many books have some kind of sticker from some award. Like there comes a point where it just doesn't mean anything. The weird echo is
Yeah.
back.
What's that?
The weird echo from before is back.
Oh no.
We just we'll just keep going. It's fine. I
um,
don't know where it's coming from or what it's doing, but it's fine.
We also have a comment from Bookishreader that some of the well-known authors have definitely some underrated books, which I think that's a good point too, is like authors who get known for like a particular thing. Like Jason Reynolds is like one of my newest favorite authors. I have loved everything I've read from him. And I feel like the only thing I really hear people talk about from him is Long Way Down, or
Mm.
most people, is Long Way Down, which is an incredible book. I love that one. But I think this is also kind of what we were talking about with like sort of there being like almost a limit on like the number of books by like diverse authors that can be like popular at one time. It's yeah, it's kind of weird and frustrating how that happens where it's like you can have one book that we talk about that like we promote all the time. Um, let's see. I'm scrolling back a little because I have not been doing as good keeping up with comments. I'm sorry, everyone. Um, Kelly also mentioned that the well-known books by marginalized authors are stories about suffering. The books about joy don't often make it to popularity, and I think that is an excellent point. That's something I've noticed too. Hannah,
Mhm.
do you also feel like that's true?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, there is a place for that as well. Like it's
Yes.
important to share. it's just the fact that there doesn't seem to be space for both, that where there really should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially not limited to, but especially for middle grade or books for younger readers, like it's so important that kids can see characters going through the hard parts that they're going through, but it's also like it's so important for kids to be able to see like people like them having good things happen to them. Like,
Hmm.
you know, maybe even a book that like doesn't deal at all with the struggle of being from a marginalized community. Like, yeah, I think you're right. I think that both of those things are equally important, and it just like the ones that win awards are usually the ones that are about suffering, like the ones that people talk about tend to be ones about suffering, and like it's understandable because those are serious issues, but it's like I think like it's equally revolutionary or equally important to have like a love story that's
Hmm.
about like people of color that are not having terrible things happen to them, or um
Yeah,
a
just
story with
living normal life.
yes, exactly, or like a kid's book that has a disabled main character where everyone is accepting of them. Like it's not about them like fighting to get people to treat them well. It's like about I don't know, them joining like a sports team or something. Um yeah. And then okay. I think the only I'm looking at my notes here. I think one of the only other things I had is something we've kind of like covered as we went, but I wanted to know if we want to talk about like specific ideas for how readers and reviewers can help, like can like make the hype problem less bad, I guess. Um yeah, so any
Yeah,
thoughts
I
on
mean,
that?
I think, yeah, like you said, we have touched on it as we've gone. I think a lot of it comes back to breaking all of those cycles of self-fulfilling prophecy. Um, like, do make content about those underrated books. Because if everyone does that, then eventually they will get the attention. Do make an effort to buy books by marginalized authors.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's that like because I guess in a way the like cycle effect, it can also work in a positive way where like if a few people talk about an underrated book by a marginalized author and then they spread that to a couple people and then those become books that people are seeing other places. It's like you can almost like harness the the booktube or book blogging hype machine for good. um yeah,
yeah.
and go ahead, sorry.
And like diversify where you're getting your recommendations from as well. Like,
Yes.
if all the people you're following read the same books, then find some people who are reading maybe different books. Or, if you're only on Bookstagram, then think about watching some booktube, or, just
Yeah, one
think.
of these days I'll make an Instagram account so I can actually like I can actually follow bookstagrammers there.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how many underhyped books you'll find.
Well, maybe I don't know, we're gonna do our part. We're gonna try. Um yeah, I think those are really good recommendations. And also something else I think is really important is talking about diverse books and underrated books, not just not just because they're diverse, you know, like um well, okay, this is going back to like the middle grade magic that we were planning. And one of the things that our group like talked about a lot that we really wanted to communicate is like you shouldn't only be reading books by black authors when you have a reading prompt that's like read a book by a black author. You know, it's
Mhm,
like it should become like second nature to like read them for all the different kinds of reasons. Or if you're doing like a like favorite fantasy books recommendations video or something, it's like you shouldn't have to like the only time you talk about books by diverse authors should not be these are my favorite books by diverse authors, if that makes
mhm,
sense. Like they're also just books. Like they're good books and you should like talk about them in all kinds of contexts and not just like, hey, bad things are happening. Read a book by a black author. It should be like
mhm.
all the time. Um, which as
Yeah,
we've
and
said, it's like it's also just good stories. So there's literally no way to lose. Like you're doing something good and you're also reading good books. So like why are you yeah. What were you going to say?
And also like be aware of it. Like if someone has a list of favorites and they're all, by white authors, or even if they're just all really well known books, whether they're diverse or not, just make don't have to call it out necessarily, but like notice it, you know, make it something that you're in the habit of being aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like noticing, like paying attention to your own or other people's reading habits is like one of the first things you can do to like notice that um that like there's a problem or that there's something going on is like, huh, like when I just read based on what I see, I end up reading a lot of books by white people, you know? Yeah, I think that's a really good point is like the awareness aspect is kind of like the first part you have to um pay attention to. And April just mentioned, I really wish that underhyped didn't equal diverse. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think it's an accident that a lot of this conversation ended up being about diverse
Yeah.
authors because that is like statistically those are the underhyped books. And yeah, it is really frustrating. And it's kind of that needing that balance between talking about diverse authors and also what we were just saying now about like don't only talk about them because they're diverse. It's like you have to kind of try to do both. Um, let's see. Okay.
Yeah. I think that was everything on my notes.
Yeah, I'm looking through my notes too, and I think we pretty much covered also what I wanted to talk about. Um,
Oh,
we,
there was, yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a tiny thing, but so something else that I've noticed is that I'll see diverse or underhyped books around and then add them to my Goodreads TBR and then completely ignore them and just like forget that they're there, and like keep reading, the books that I am seeing and the books that, the I think this is a general, possibly Goodreads TBR thing for a lot of us,
yeah,
is that, you read the books that grab your attention in the moment for whatever reason,
yeah, and
which
often
may
that's
not be the
because
books that you have been planning to read or the books that you have thought about. And
yeah,
if the books which are grabbing your attention in the moment are the hyped ones, then those underhyped ones, whatever intentions you had, may not then get read. So
yeah,
again, that's something to make an effort to do. That's like for myself as well. Like neither of us are perfect.
yeah, exactly. Well, and I've noticed that I'm a lot less active about prioritizing nonfiction by diverse authors, and I had kind of thought like if I had like tried to figure out a reason at all, I had kind of thought like, well, I don't read nearly as much nonfiction as I do fiction, so it's kind of what we're saying. It's like, oh, it just happened to be that I wasn't picking up nonfiction by diverse authors, and like that's not true. Like I kind of need to get better about um what we were talking about, which is actively making a point to not just notice these books, but actually pick them up and read them and talk about them. Um, like I was not as good about doing that with nonfiction as I am with fiction, and I definitely still want to keep working on that. And also like not reading a lot of nonfiction is not an excuse for doing that, which I was like, oh, it's like I just don't read as much nonfiction. And it's like, well, when I do, I should be prioritizing nonfiction by people who are not like me, because that's kind of one of the points of nonfiction is like not just learning about things that you're already like knowledgeable about or interested in, but things that you don't know as much about. Um, yeah, and then going back to what you were saying with like you kind of like you'll add them to your Goodreads TBR, but then you'll end up picking up other things. I think that makes sense too because a lot of times what will remind us about a book we want to read is seeing someone talk about it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if we see people talk about a popular book, it's like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to read that one. Whereas, you're much less likely to see somebody like put it on a TBR or like talk about it in a wrap up if it is underhyped.
Yeah.
Um,
And like I was looking through my Goodreads TBR today because just as you do. And I was like, I don't remember anything about most of these books. I don't know, I've got no idea what they are and the reason that they're still there and most of them have been there for several years is because, you know, I added them and then no one ever mentioned them and then I forgot about them and now I don't know what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Goodreads is like a whole other aspect of that I think like the way that um book like websites are set up, it's like also part of it because like the books that you get recommended are often like yeah, it's partly based on what you've already read, but it's also based on what is already popular, which again is like always the same kind of book. Um yes. And
And I like Bookishreader here is saying that people with disabilities need to have hype as well. And yes, when we've been saying like white people, but like that's kind of a shorthand, which like again, I guess that's a fault of ours for not being more inclusive there. But we do mean all kinds of diversity and representation, not just racial.
yes, that's a good point. Yeah. We were kind of using it as shorthand there. So that is a great point. Thank you, Bookish Reader. Um Also, I want to quickly mention Wave said, unfortunately, the overhyped books can be more easily available. That's another point, especially what we were saying earlier with like small publishers or
Mhm.
like independently published or things like that. Is it sometimes it's literally books that are less accessible, that like your library doesn't have, or like even um, like actual bookstores don't have or don't carry, or it's
Mhm.
like hard to get them, um, or they go out of print, etc. So yeah, like
Yeah,
accessibility is
and
also
self published or independently published can often be more expensive as well, which is a barrier,
yeah, yep,
unfortunately.
yeah. I know a lot of these kind of it's like it's obviously it's not their fault that they're more expensive, and it kind of sucks
Mhm.
that because of that they become even less hyped or like less available to people. Um, okay, I think that was all my notes. Does anyone in the comments have any other last minute topics? It looks like yeah. So Annalisa and Kelly are talking about how overhyped books are way more likely to be at the library, um, which I think is another part of that problem is like especially for people who are primarily library readers, you're kind of dependent on what they have, and like depending on how good your library is about like purchasing recommended titles. Like I don't think mine is very good because I have recommended like several things that they buy, although obviously libraries are working a little differently right now. um, yeah,
Yeah.
but it can
Although
be
Shannon is also saying, like, I do think you're right. I think like when I was younger, I browsed a lot in the library and I read a lot more unknown. Well, also I wasn't on, the bookish internet at that time, and I didn't know what was or wasn't hype. But I do think I read a lot of unknown titles, whereas now, after, you know, more recently, I've been reserving things more and reading things from the library that I am asking for, and those have tended to be more the popular things. So I think it is there in the libraries, but you have to make the effort to go to the library and find it, which obviously is difficult at the moment.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And as Shannon also pointed out, they're less likely to have holds, like um, long wait lines. Yeah, and I've always been really like pretty happy with my library because it's a relatively small one, but considering that, I feel like they have a good selection, like of quite a few popular books, but also like random ones that I'm like, oh, I'd really like to read that, and I check, and my library happens to have it, even if I've never really heard other people talk about it. So yeah, I think libraries are definitely more like even with the other things we were talking about, I think libraries are definitely more likely to almost like implicitly encourage you to read underhyped things because
Hmm.
you can just like browse through in a way that you can't always in a bookstore, and um, they're less likely to have, well, I think they're less likely to have like sponsorships or like this is the book of the month because it's the one that the publisher paid us a lot to talk about, like some bookstores do. Um, okay, we have another question. So Julie wants to know, she says, do you think that something like tags or challenges could help for diverse and underrated reads on any of the bookish platforms? That is something I have seen recently. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like with middle grade magic, but like if for people in the comments who might not know, that's the readathon that Cara and Kelly, who's in the comments, and some other people are co-hosting next month. Like you've got lots of challenges on there about reading diverse books and reading books by marginalized or about marginalized people, and I think that's definitely something that you'd at least that will at least make people think about and seek out those books.
Yeah, we hope so. We really hope so. And I think I've been noticing more tags and readathons, and like they're specifically devoted um, to reading books by marginalized authors. And as Bookishreader pointed out, that includes people with disabilities and all different kinds. Like I think racial right now is the one that tends to get talked about, but that includes disabilities, religious minorities, neurodiverse characters, and I have also been noticing that there's more. I don't want to say more attention, but there's more like tangible like content, I guess, coming out about that, and I think overall that is a good thing. I also think like that shouldn't be the only time you talk about them, which is kind of what we were saying earlier. Is like I know a lot of Black booktubers have seen a huge increase in their subscribers, which is great. But they're also saying like, if you subscribe to me because I'm Black and then you never watch my videos, that actually hurts the channel because like
Mm-hmm.
engagement is really low. So it's that kind of thing of like performative activism, and it's like you need to actually be like engaging with this content. Like subscribe to people who you actually are interested in seeing what they have to say, not just because like, oh, I feel bad, I guess I'll subscribe to like a like person of color or something. Um, okay, let's
Yeah, I've
see.
also been seeing Bookstagram photo challenges. I've seen quite a few about diversifying your posts as well, which is important
Yeah,
and I think definitely useful.
yeah. And let's see. Okay, so Shannon also said you can even do a self challenge for tags to only talk about books you've never talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a good point. I haven't been doing very many tags lately because I'm just very behind on them. Um, but that is something that I try to do, or at least I try to limit the number of um, I try to limit the number of repeats I have. And because for one thing, it's like I kind of treat tag videos like recommendations anyway, and I don't want to recommend the same books over and over. So also, it's like if I see a question that's like, "What's your favorite fantasy book?" It's like I'm not going to talk about the same one every time. I'm going to talk about a favorite that I have read recently that I haven't talked about. Um, which, sorry, like not to make it all about what I do in tags, like
Yeah, no, I think the way you do it is really helpful, and I think definitely because and the less the more you make a conscious choice not to talk about the same books every time is the more often that there'll be books that people don't know about.
yeah.
My sisters are here.
Should we wrap things up? Let's see. I'm trying to see if I've missed anything.
Um, but yeah, unless anyone in the comments has anything else to add.
Okay. So like we were talking about at the beginning of this video, this is kind of Hannah and my like first, I guess, entry in this underrated or underhyped book series we're doing. So we're also going to be doing um, 3 recommendations posts, and again, Hannah's blog and Instagram is linked down below, so that's where she will be posting those. For me, they will be videos. And we also we mentioned this in our announcements, but we encourage you guys to like join in if you want to. You don't have to use the categories that we did, although you are welcome to. And it doesn't have to be on a particular timeline because, like we have been saying, like it's always important and enjoyable to talk about underhyped books. So like no matter when you post it, if you want to like join in, that would be great.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I know someone in the comments was asking if we're going to be doing recommendations. I think she meant in the video, but that's what that's where they'll be.
yes, and actually that's a good reminder. I will link our announcement to after we end the live show because we actually talk about the categories there. So if you are interested in those, then we can.
Yeah, or if I don't know if you can put the categories in the description as well. I don't know if they're there.
Right. I could. Yeah, I'll do that too. That's a good point. Okay. I think that is everything. So, yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you all who
Thank you so
participated.
much.
Yeah, we really, really enjoyed this, and you guys had great
Hmm.
comments and questions. That was
Yeah,
really
really valuable
wonderful.
input.
Yeah. And yeah, we look forward to if you guys do join in with recommendations. We're really excited to see um, the books that you're talking about. And yeah, we hope that this was useful or enjoyable or anything. And yeah, I guess I kind of ended up taking over the intro, the intro exit parts because
No, no,
this is the channel we were
all good.
hosting it on.
Yeah, no, that works perfectly fine for me.
Okay, good.
Um,
Um,
yeah, thank you, Cara, for the the idea to do this.
well, thank you for hosting it with me. This has been really fun, and I'm really excited to like continue working on our
Hmm.
recommendations. We have to narrow them down now, which will be interesting. Yeah, but thank you guys all so much, and we will see you for our recommendations posts. Thank you for joining in. Bye.
Bye.